Welcome, everyone. We're here with a special conversation ahead of the up-and-coming conference, Wisdom for a World in Transition, happening this November the 1st and 2nd in Ocala, Florida. This transformative weekend honors the legacy of Dr. Douglas Baker, a visionary teacher of esoteric astrology and ancient wisdom, and brings together seekers, scholars, and spiritual explorers from all walks of life. So today, we're joined by someone who knew Dr. Baker personally and worked alongside him for decades. So Marcus Hayward. And Marcus spent 30 years or more immersed in the teachings and the mission of Dr. Baker. He's here to offer a rare insight into the man, the message, and the movement. Marcus, welcome. We're really glad to have you here.
Thank you very much, Alan. It's good to be here.
So let's go back to where it all began for you. I think 1979, you were training as a psychiatric nurse when you encountered Dr. Baker's work. So what was happening in your life at that time? And what was it about his teachings that so resonated with you strongly?
Well, even though I was working towards a professional qualification, psychiatric nursing, RMN, I felt there was something missing. I was really searching for meaning and purpose in my life, although that's how I see it or realize now. And working in a Victorian psychiatric hospital just didn't do it. I questioned a lot of the approaches that were being used, ECT, the physical treatments for mental illness just didn't seem right in my mind. And I went through a period of depression during my early 20s. And at that point, I was really searching, and a friend of mine gave me a book, Meditation by Douglas Baker. And that was the first book of his that I read. And after reading it, I went back and said, I want to know a bit more about this. And I was invited to attend Claregate College in Potters Bar. I was very fortunate to have been brought up in St Albans, just 10 miles from where Douglas Baker lived. So I went along and that's where it started. I've been involved ever since.
So can you tell us about your first encounter with Dr. Baker? And was there a moment when you knew that your path had changed in life?
Well, so when I first attended the college, I walked into the front room where his books were laid out and Douglas Baker came in. I was a very sort of sensitive, shy young man. And he took one look at me and I went bright red, as I tended to do in those days. But he walked up to me, Ian introduced him. He said, "So what do you do?" And I explained I was psychiatric nurse training. He immediately picked up esoteric psychology, wrote a dedication to me in it, handed me the book, and walked away. And of course, that was the next book I read. But I was inspired that evening by his talk. Yeah, I just got more and more involved, and it grew from there. There was a supplementary book that I read at the time called The Power of Dreams, or otherwise called The Dream Game, by Anne Faraday, which gave directions for how you could create a dialogue with your dream self. And around that time, those combination of things, learning the tools to use dreaming, and my experiences with new experiences with Claregate College, my dream life exploded. I was having numerous dreams. Douglas Baker and this book advocated writing your dreams down. I suddenly realized I was opening a whole new visage into the world that I'd never realized was there before. So I think it was that Douglas called it psychoragus, the bursting out of the soul of the unconscious. And I felt I went through that process and it hooked me from that moment on. I realized there was something here. The dreams gave me meaning. I could see reflections of what Douglas was talking about in his talks. Yeah.
So for those who don't know him, who was Douglas Baker? Not just the scholar, but the human being.
He was a unique individual. He had huge charisma, very charismatic individual. Um, uh, when he spoke, people listened. He spoke with huge authority, but he'd achieved that, as I subsequently learned, through blood, sweat, toil, and tears. He'd been through the wars. He'd lost his mother when he was young. He also searched for meaning in his early life and found it through theosophy, but then realized that theosophy at that time was really only directed at the intelligentsia of the planet, professionals. There was whole swathes of humanity that just couldn't engage with how the material was presented, the way it was written. So he took it upon himself to put it into the language of the day, and that became his singular purpose in his life.
So
Yeah.
you worked very closely with him. I mean, book production, lectures, multimedia. So what was that process like behind the scenes working with Douglas?
He was focused on his work. Nothing else mattered but putting those teachings out into the world, making it accessible to everybody, no matter what their socio-economic background. And that was all that mattered. So if you were there, he expected you to work towards that objective as well. So it was unrelenting, but it was very much the work was very much part of the service that he provided and that you provided as well. And we'll subsequently get to it. But there's three key elements of spiritual development, and service is a fundamental part of that. So whatever else you did, if you were helping him, putting the material into a format that people could understand and help him to deliver it to the public, you were providing a service to humanity, and you would gain spiritual benefit from that.
So is there a specific story or moment from those years that still guides you today?
Yes, actually, there was it took its time, and I worked really hard. But during the 80s, I needed to certain things in my life visit my father, my birth father, who had never left Australia. My mother had separated. I was brought back to England when I was a year old, so I needed to visit my father and spend time in Australia. So that was all in the 80s. So in some respects, I didn't fully commit myself until after that I'd reconnected with my father. I returned to England and re-engaged with Douglas Baker and the group then. And it was late 80s. I thought, right now, I'm going to dedicate myself to this work. And a very, very profound thing happened in 1990. Uh, Douglas Baker called me to his office, and he said, Marcus, I've had an experience, and in that experience, you were struck by lightning. Um, and then he explained some other things that happened in that vision that he'd had, and he concluded that conversation with me by saying, I've had this before, and I know that it means you will have an experience of fire. I don't know when it'll happen. I don't know if you'll be conscious when it happens, but I know it will happen. Well, I was just about to, I had a big project on the way that was going to take me a couple of weeks. So I thought nothing of it, got involved in this major project that I was doing. Um, and then about 2 weeks later, it happened. So as usual, I was lying in my bed. I had a dream, and the dream was full of really important images. But at one moment in that dream, um, I connected, or a great being connected with me, glanced. It was a glance, nothing more, a sideways glance from a being. And I may explain more of this at the conference in November. And at the moment that glance, our eyes connected, I was hit by a force that I could not imagine. A huge force poured through me. It was like being in a wind tunnel, unable to move because of the force of the hurricane winds. Um, and it seemed to go on for ages. I think it may have been a few seconds or minutes. Um, and it was a true fire experience. The closest I've ever seen to describing that experience was when Douglas talks about the experience he had lying in the crypt of a church in Italy after being seriously wounded. After which he got up and got onto a plane to be evacuated as a walking wounded with severe injuries to his chest.
I guess an experience like that, kind of something that, as you say, is indescribable. But
It was
yeah,
very real. It
yeah, yeah,
cannot
yeah,
be
yeah,
denied. And
yeah,
that our experiences are such that the person that has them, there is no doubt they are not a figment of the imagination.
yeah,
They have a whole different category. Um, so as a result of that, I thought this is it. I'm dedicated to this
yeah,
work for the
yeah.
foreseeable future. And over the next 10 years, in the 90s, I did things I could not conceive that I was capable of prior to that. Organizing a lecture tour
Mm,
in 93 and 93-4 of Australia that was very successful. I think we had 17 seminars and lectures. Douglas had 17 lectures and seminars, average attendance of over 70 at each one. Um, and I think that fire experience was a factor in my being able to do that. But interestingly, during that time and at times afterwards, when I was involved overseas on a major project for Douglas, um, I would occasionally wake in the night feeling a flow of energy through me, a washing
mm.
of energy through me. Not as great as that first fire experience, but it felt like I was being rewarded with fire because I was doing that really important work.
So one of the themes of the conference is practicality and how ancient wisdom can help us navigate through today's world. So, what were some of the tools that Dr. Baker offered for staying balanced in this world of chaos and speed as well?
There were three major elements of spiritual development that he advocated. Um, Service to humanity was one we've already discussed. The other was studying the works of people that have gone before us, spiritual works, the likes of Alice Bailey,
Mm.
Theosophical Society, Madame Blavatsky. Look at those works, and by doing those works, you draw closer to the people that wrote that wrote those volumes. Um, and the third was meditation. Learn to sit quietly in your own space. He would say the soul disseminates in silence.
Mm.
Another of his common expressions was meditation begins in the space between thoughts. And I've never heard a better succinct explanation for
True.
meditation than that. But of course, he would then advocate you don't just leave a space because if you just have blankness, you'll fall asleep.
Mm.
You put something in its place, an image, a thought, a concept, and that becomes the focus of the meditation. And I've used those techniques ever since, and they have kept me going, even through the 21st century, the last 20 years, working at a quite senior level in the NHS, very stressful. And I
Mm.
used his techniques to survive those years as well.
Sure. So, what did he mean by mental clarity or spiritual development? Because these terms can sound very abstract, but how did he make them real?
Yes, I think mental clarity is the ability to think without the rippling effect or the distorting effect of the emotions. So, one image he'd often use was like a lake. And in most cases, the wind, the external influence causes ripples on that lake. So anything we pick up internally could be distorted by those ripples.
Mm.
So we had to still the mind, quieten the emotions, to make the surface of that lake as crystal clear as possible, as flat as possible, and then it was possible to pick up that voice of the silence from within, that grows as we do that, becomes more and more influential in our lives.
Sure.
So mental clarity is the ability to think without the influence of emotion. that could distort the outcomes of those thoughts.
Sure, sure. So your lecture at the Akala conference is titled How Esoteric Studies Answers Life's Great Questions. So without too many spoilers, what do you most want people to walk away with from your talk?
I'm going to use, so Douglas in his works provided a fantastic repository of literature, poetry that had inspired him. And over the years of listening to him lecture for 20 years, reading his books, sometimes several times, a lot of those bits of poetry have become embedded in my own mind. I can remember them and recite them. And I found that incredibly rewarding and helpful in my life subsequently. Um, you come across, you have a difficulty, but then you can remember a piece of poetry that explains it or helps you rise above it. And I want people to go away to realize that's available for anybody. Um, uh,
Yeah.
and I think it's a really important principle. Uh, Robert Browning was a poet that Douglas Baker loved and was had a huge influence on him. And in his work Paracelsus, Robert Browning talks about truth lies within ourselves. It takes no rise from outward things, whatever you may believe. So I want people to go away and believe the answer to the great questions lies within themselves, and there are tools that enable everyone to come to terms with those questions.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So day 2 of our conference explores how metaphysics aligns with modern science. So did Dr. Baker engage with the emerging fields like quantum physics or consciousness studies?
Absolutely. Now, I'm a fifth-ray personality with a fourth-ray mind, and I embrace the scientific method. I subscribe to the New Scientist. I do love science, and a lot of that has come from Douglas himself. He was also very much focused on the scientific method. As a doctor of medicine, he'd studied science. He was very scientifically orientated, and he said, there will be science will find answers eventually to these things that the esoteric already understands
Yeah,
and accepts. It's just a matter of time.
sure. Because actually, you kind of preempted my next question in the sense of, do you think science is really starting to validate what esoteric teachings have been pointing out for a very, very, very long time?
Yes, I do. One example is David Bohm, a theoretical physicist who started to realize we cannot understand the quantum world without understanding consciousness and the nature of consciousness. And this comes from, this is a natural consequence of the quantum wave collapse phenomena. The moment a quantum effect is observed, it becomes fixed in time, collapses into a particle. And actually, the latest discoveries is that the quantum fields that exist everywhere are the fundamental nature of reality, not the particles, the suns, the galaxies, the cosmos that we see. They actually, particles are described as excitations in quantum fields that have a temporary existence, albeit that temporary existence could be for the life of the universe entirely, but they will end and sink back into that quantum field. So I think science is reluctantly starting to realize that we have to look at consciousness, and that's the consciousness remains the big question in such a hard problem in science.
Sure.
But we are gradually coming close to that understanding.
What excites you about this bridge between science and spirituality, and why is it so important now?
It's really important because with the development of AI, we have reached a turning point with our scientific investigation. And I'm not yet certain how AI is going to influence this understanding of consciousness. So I think it's really important that people with esoteric inclinations, like us, like the people that we attend the conference, keep in mind that that there is a spiritual reality in the world, and whether science using AI uncovers it now or maybe years to come, it's a really important development to help us come to terms with our existence.
But for someone who's just beginning to question or explore or awaken, so what would you say to encourage them to take that next step?
Well, taking a lesson from my own life, start a dream diary. Um, People will say, "Oh, I don't dream." But actually, if you open a diary, if you start write out a diary, write in it your intention to remember your dreams, write them down when you have them, you will start to dream. I'm absolutely believe that everyone can access their dream life. Um, and that will open up a channel with your own higher self, with your own spiritual being. And actually, many things grow from that. Of course, also learn about sitting in silence, learning to meditate, and start to read the writings of people that have achieved a degree of spiritual enlightenment, whatever field route they might have um, taken to get there.
And it was a saying that Douglas always used to quote was that our libraries are full of books of people who have gone ahead of us and left their experiences for us to read. And it's
Yes.
very true. So finally, thank you. I just wanted to ask you the one last thing was why should someone attend the Wisdom for a World in Transition conference this November? And what kind of experience can they expect to take home with them?
I've always found conferences like this incredibly inspiring. Um, it's good to come with questions about your own life, how you might proceed in the future. But this conference should give you uh, a, a broad understanding of the potential that's out there to follow your own path to spiritual enlightenment. There will be people there that have achieved a degree of spiritual understanding, and to share that information or to receive that information will help to give people a leg up to achieve that themselves. We are in the Aquarian age, coming out of the Piscean age. Now, in the Piscean age, people could achieve spiritual enlightenment in isolation. We have in Norwich, here in England, the story of St. Julian of Norwich, who was an anchoress. She decided to be walled up into a little cell in Norwich where she would commune with God. And some of her writings are quite profound. She was the one who said, "All will be well, all will be well, and all manner of things will be well." And there's some remarkable things in her writings that reflect some of what we now understand about the nature of the esoteric world through the writings of Alice Bailey and H.P. Blavatsky. So if people come to this conference, they should go away with a reservoir of material and hopefully be inspired to follow that to their own enlightenment.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Marcus. Thank you so much for your time and your stories and your dedication to this work because you're one of the people that kept Dr. Baker's legacy alive for a very long time. So thank you and look forward to seeing you in November.
Thank you. I very much look forward to seeing you there too.